Hello there. My name is Roy Blatchford, and I am the series editor of the A to Z series. 15 titles for primary, secondary, special teachers. I have a few laid out before me. We cover primary leadership, addressing disadvantage, secondary leadership, great classrooms, diversity and inclusion, special educational needs, independent school leadership, something for most tastes. And we're running a series of conversations with authors. And I'm delighted today that we'll be talking with Jamie O'Dowd, who is the editor, author of the A to Z of Student Wellbeing. Welcome, Jamie. And I thought I'd just kick off by reading from the cover so we all know what we're talking about today. The A to Z of Student Wellbeing is a topical compendium of research, ideas, and approaches for teachers, leaders, and families organized around the 26 letters of the English alphabet. And having worked with you, obviously, on this series, I know, and you might like just to kick off with this just a little bit about how you got into this territory, and I know how well researched the book is. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for having me. To answer your question, how did I get into sort of, I suppose, well-being to begin with? I didn't know whether I wanted to be a teacher or a social worker. My family fostered children all through my childhood, and I knew that I wanted to improve sort of the outcomes for young people. I was able to do that through teaching and through pursuing a pastoral role. In, I suppose, my eagerness and my frustration that in schools that I'd worked at and schools that I visited, I did see that the off-the-shelf sort of well-being programs, particularly in the time after COVID, just didn't seem to work as expensive and as well intended as they were. And in our post-pandemic haste to really ensure that we were doing well-being well, and I use those air quotes deliberately because that's a problem in itself. I was frustrated as why we couldn't get it right. And what I went away and did was a master's in education to look at why well-being programs fail, which for somebody in well-being and somebody as positive as I like to think I am, that's a really negative perspective on it. So actually for the book, I turned things around, and once I saw you were doing this series, it was a case of, well, I put all that time and effort into understanding why they fail. So let's just flip that and talk about what makes them work, what makes wellbeing programs successful, and turn that into something where teachers, educators, and leaders can hopefully reduce and take away some of the mythology and the science around wellbeing and just turn it into something practical.
Thank you. And just by way of context, where are you speaking from at the moment? And perhaps a little bit about your kind of educational experience. I know you, as you said, you didn't start in education, but just perhaps a little bit of background would be useful there.
Yeah, sure. So I did come to education late, which does have its benefits, does have its challenges. I trained as a teacher when I was around 26, 27, spending time in schools in Nottingham before relocating to my current position as assistant head teacher, looking after pastoral systems, well-being, behaviour at St Christopher's School here in the wonderful Kingdom of Bahrain.
Thanks. Now I'm going to dip straight into the book, and we can may cover this, but in terms of an A to Z, you begin with atmosphere and behavior and character. I love the chapter called Jenga, and you might want to just touch on that to explain why. And of course, having edited lots of these books, we needed to be creative about finding letters. Z, Z is, well, I thought we might also perhaps just end there. And we've cheated a bit with exercising. But perhaps one of the chapters I've heard you speak powerfully about. Could you just talk to us a little about the G, the gratitude chapter, please? It's perhaps an unusual word to find in a book. I don't know.
Yeah, and gratitude. Prior to me conducting the research, doing my master's, I was really fascinated by positive education, and positive education has really sort of reshaped the way we think about what it is we do with young people in an education setting. So you mentioned atmosphere there, and I would imagine, as a really high percentage of teachers listening to this would automatically assume that, of course, it's important that we have a positive and an atmosphere conducive to learning where young people can thrive. But gratitude is one of the areas where the scientific evidence, and this is the part of my research where I really had to sort of engage my brain because it delves into psychology and it delves into how the brain functions. Well-being can suffer sometimes from a bit of a bad press with people thinking it's a little bit fluffy, and then it lacks sort of depth and a research base. And gratitude is the one area, not just in education, but even in sort of social studies, where people have studied the brain, studied humans' interactions, and have been able to prove by different measures, whether it's endorphins, brain activity, that when young people and humans consciously practice gratitude, that what comes back to them is an improved sense of well-being. And that's a really simplified version of the huge research that was done by Martin Seligman out in Australia as an offshoot of positive psychology. But the problem with gratitude is people often reduce it down to saying please and thank you or being grateful for what you have. And it's so much more than that. And actually, when you start to put some of the tips and exercises in the book into practice, particularly I'm a senior school teacher, particularly with teenagers, it can be, to quote what the word kids use, it can be cringe. And it can be, oh, come on. Well, you really want me to write an email to somebody who's made my day better yesterday? That's not what I do. And actually, when it becomes a pattern and when it becomes normalized and when it becomes part of a routine, young people really like the morning when they go, oh, it's our gratitude day today. Ah, I know I'm going to send an email to the coffee shop boys this morning. They're always really, really helpful, really, really kind. So then they start looking for it. And of course, they get emails back or they get thanks and gratitude back. And it's a 360-degree self-fulfilling circle that what you give out, you get back. And that makes you feel good. And also it reminds you that there are things out there in life that make you happy and that really make life worth living. And sometimes just taking that time to stop and go, yeah, actually, it's the security guard who always opens the car door for me, always brings me a, knows my name, even though he's just the security guard. Those moments help with connections and help with relations. So, again, misunderstood, but really, really powerful.
Thanks very much. You working with teenagers, and it was interesting when I interview teenagers, often in schools, and we talk about, I say, what are you proud of? They usually, got loads of things to say about their school. One of the things I say, what would you like to change? They say, oh, well, some of the PSHE programs we do are all a bit, well, what was the word you used? Cringe.
Cringe.
And I just wondered what I mean, I know obviously your school and how successful it is with PSHE programs, but from your experience of researching and looking at other schools, actually, do you have any kind of tips about how we should, particularly with teenagers, make PSHE programs come alive and meaning to them?
Yeah, and it's a constant source of frustration for students, not so much in my school, but when I've been around schools in the Middle East, and speak to students like you do on school visits. And I've obviously got a vested interest in PSHE programs. And when I asked them, what is it you want? What if it was up to you and you designed it tomorrow, what is it you want? They said, things we can do now. Don't stand at the board. Don't go through the slides. Don't tell us about, for example, gratitude. Tell us what to do. Give us the rest of the lesson to go and do it. Let's practice it. Let us get it wrong. Let us roll with it, play with it, see what we want to do with it. And I think so many schools underestimate young people, and we talk at them. And actually, when you give them that seed, you just give them a kernel of an idea or of a suggestion, and then say, sit back. We talk a lot as teachers. We talk at students. Sit back and say, okay, so that's the idea that I'm giving you. Even if you had to give them a couple of weeks worth of lessons to say, what are you going to do with that? How can you turn that into something? Even challenging them with problems. If you said, look, gratitude is something that isn't being practiced a lot in this school, rather than us telling you what we're going to do, get some programs together, get some plans, present those to us. We're going to take one of those. So I think making young people partners in PSHE rather than an audience giving it over to them when we've asked our students at St. Chris about what they would like to do with PSHE. That's what they've said, and we've changed our program so there's more project elements to that, and they can actually go away and create something and be owners of it.
Yes, thank you for that. That's really very good tips. I'm going to just take us to another dimension. I love your last chapter, which is Z, 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 Z. And it was probably a chapter which I made me really think about teenagers and sleep, which is what the subject is. What's your reflection working with children? And actually, you've written the book in such a way that it's very readable, by parents. What, as a parent as well, what's your sense about what we should be saying in schools in relation to well-being and sleep?
I think this is the one chapter where I'm happy to hold my hands up and say, I don't think yet there's an answer. But timely that we're having this conversation today because a few days ago I worked very closely with Komodo, and the Komodo is a well-being platform which tracks, monitors, speaks to students about their well-being, and they have something. They put out something like 1 million surveys a year, and what they do is they produce a great report at the end of the year, and it's trends around the world. And things go up, things go down, different areas. And sleep has always been the lowest scoring area on Komodo. And it's the one as a teacher you have the least control over because the teenage brain, particularly for me in the senior school, the teenage brain does behave differently. I've got my daughter back here at the moment from university. She's 19 and she comes in at 6 a.m. and she sleeps till 6 p.m. She's nocturnal, and we all we can do at the moment, I think, is teach, arm students with the facts. We do look for support from home. I think device usage, we're on a real cusp at the moment with device usage and social media, where I'm seeing the tide is starting to turn. And I think, as much as I say in the book as well, let's not demonize devices, let's not demonize social media. I think where it interferes with sleep, again, because of the science, blue lights, these kind of things. I don't think it's helped young people and sleep. Schools, I don't think, have the answer. I think what we can do is provide students with the facts. Also, working with parents, we do parent partnership programs, like most schools do, having parents in and giving them the benefit of our expertise, but at an adult level, adult to adult level, rather than a adult to child level. So sleep, as much as it is the last chapter, it had to be in there because it is so important. It's still a bit of a mystery at the minute how we tackle it.
Oh, well, that's really good, especially the personal note there with your daughter. I just want to perhaps round off on one of the great challenges is no doubt post-COVID, and one sees it in national school context schools, international schools, is attendance. And
Mm,
I do visit secondary schools around this country where 85% attendance, 88% attendance, maybe, year 10, year 9. And I just wonder what more you think we can do. I could quote from lots of bits from the book, including a very nice coda where you talk about making sure teachers look after themselves. But if we move just on that, perhaps the teenage attendance issue, what reflections do you have in relation to well-being affecting attendance? And I know you touch in the book about on belonging, which is a word much used in schools these days. But perhaps just round us off on that aspect of well-being. It may be a bit of a negative thing to end on, but it seems to me a realistic challenge at the moment, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think we could go full circle with it. We talk about attendance, we talk about resilience, more or specifically lack of resilience, which has come about specifically since post-COVID. As I'm a parent too, we do wrap our children up in times of crises and in the different conflicts that are going on around the world, and belonging and relationships. Where students don't have the resilience to manage their relationships, then it's easier to hide away. Um, Again, it sounds like somebody like me shouldn't be using this sort of language, but using the well-being card or using the mental health card is why I think well-being can sometimes suffer from a bad reputation, because I often stand up and speak to parents and say, look, things are going to be tough. We're heading into year 10 or whatever audience I'm talking to. Things are going to be tough. And just because I'm here as head of well-being don't ring me up and say, but you're head of well-being, everything should be fine for these children. Absolutely won't be. But as a result of COVID, the pandemic, and the subsequent issues we've experienced around the world, we're throwing more and more protection around students, young people, children. We're bringing their resilience down. They're finding it difficult to face the inevitable challenges that happen at school, which is absolutely fundamental to their development. And I believe, and I'd love to give you some research or quotes on this, I can't at the minute, but I believe that's impacting on attendance because also parents know they're aware of the alarming dip in young people's mental health. And we all do it as parents. We all sometimes take the easy route. I'm seeing a slight change in that where parents are emailing into schools and saying it's a bad day for them today. They need to come in, but can you just look after them or can you give them a safe space? But they're absolutely coming in. So I'm hoping a little bit like sort of social media and phone use, that the evidence that we're reaping from the post-pandemic years is starting to now just raise red flags to adults, parents, teachers, and say, actually, this isn't great. You might think you're doing them a favor by keeping them off. Because as far as I'm aware, there's no massive rise in illnesses and actual medical conditions. So we have to look at what the conditions are that are being created that enable parents to keep their children off school. And I think it's that. I think it's the well-being, relationship, belonging, axis.
Thanks, Jamie. You referenced a number of things there. And just to say, as part of the series, at the end of each of the chapters, there's an aside, and many of yours are very active um, tips and ideas to do in the classrooms, and they're fun. And also, there's a section 2 where you've got quite an interesting thing around the well-being speedometer. You've got a
Mm.
digital leadership framework, a mindfulness script, all kinds of things I think which are, very useful in classrooms. Just rounding us off then, perhaps a final word. Is there anything when you kind of look ahead? Maybe I say to you, Jamie, write the second edition. Is there anything that you would perhaps, thinking back, give greater emphasis to? Or is there a topic that lies ahead? AI often comes to mind, but is there something that you think, oh, looking back on writing the book, I perhaps could have given greater emphasis to, or I did anyway? Just a final reflection on that whole process of putting together, a very strong book on well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've answered the question for me because since this book was written, AI has just sort of taken off astronomically, and some of the alarming things that I'm reading about the way young people use AI is almost as a life coach, almost they're becoming a mental health crutch, a well-being crutch. They're taking relationship advice. And the danger of that, of course, is again resilience. The R in the A to Z went to relationships because I don't think any book on well-being could be written without acknowledgement of relationships. But resilience, as I've spoken about, would also feature quite heavily. AI, but also working in conjunction with parents. I think the schools that do this type of work best have that open relationship with parents because there's no perfect parent, there's no perfect teacher, and there's no perfect school. But if you sort of combine all your resources and everybody is focused on making the outcomes for that individual child the best it possibly can, and children and young people in general, then I think how we look at parent partnerships, how we look at being united rather than opposing forces, I think would be really powerful. The resilience, parent partnerships, and AI, which is frightening as exciting as it is, particularly if you're a bit of a tech geek like me. It's great. I'm using it a lot. But then when I see what the young people are using it for, it's wild country. It's bandit country out there with AI.
Well, we'll end there. It's interesting you talk about the rise of AI, and it made me go to the front of the book to look at when we published this. It was only last year. And
Oh, was
so
it?
yeah, it was only but last year. So we're saying that in quite a short period of time, AI has done what it's done. Jamie, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed, the author of The A to Z of Student Wellbeing.
Thank you,
Thank
Roy. Thank
you,
you.
everybody, for listening.